friends, welcome back, or welcome if you're new here. My name is Stacy and I am the Chapter Conundrum, and in today's video I want to talk to y'all about 10 reasons that I might DNF a book, or at least things that really tank my rating if I do manage to finish out a book that has this. So over the years I have gotten better and better at DNFing, and also just kind of having that intuitive like, oh, maybe I should DNF this kind of feeling. There was a time when I was new to reading where I would stick things out because as a plot reader I was so worried that something exciting would happen that I would miss out on. But no longer. I am more and more okay with DNFing books these days. So I wanted to go ahead and talk to you guys about things that will make me DNF. So the first and most obvious one that usually I will DNF very quickly for these days is if a book has overly descriptive prose. So if I feel at all like I'm wading through the prose to get to something interesting that's happening and I keep zoning out because something is being described in great detail, or like different things in the book are being described at length, that is one of the things that has me like completely losing interest. I have some degree of aphantasia, and so I don't visualize what I'm reading. And so when we're spending a lot of time kind of describing everything in great detail, like I don't care. Where's the tension in the story? Where is the story? How do the characters feel about things? That's what I want to know. I don't want to know what everything looks like to the minute detail. Like it's not for me. I understand that some people get like movies in their mind and they love those kind of books, and that's awesome, but it's not something that works for me. And so that is one of the things that will quickly have me putting something down. The second biggest reason and thing that has me kind of DNFing quickly is either overly complicated, like really ancient classic type, or really over melodramatic prose. And it's funny that prose is so high on my list because I'm somebody who's usually not overly picky with writing, but there are certain things that will just instantly turn me off. And when I encounter them, I know it right away. I can handle kind of some dense prose sometimes. It really depends what I'm in the mood for and how much headspace I'm willing to give something. But if you have like older style classic prose, or just like really melodramatic similes and metaphors in your prose, like nope. So I feel like explaining, classic or older prose, that's pretty straightforward. There's just something in my brain that disconnects emotionally from the text when it has that type of language. And for melodramatic prose, that's more like when an author has really kind of intangible like metaphors or similes that are like for dramatic effect. So things like she smiled and it was like the glimmer of a new star. Like no, it wasn't like the glimmer of a new star. That doesn't feel realistic at all. I think not only do those kinds of descriptions really annoy me, but then further, I want to know more in depth how the character's feeling about something. So like I would rather get inner monologue saying that the character was like really angsty and freaking out and elated about something in more detail, rather than like, oh, her smile was like the glimmer of a new star, it was so bright, like it's not the writing style that works for me. And yeah, that kind of stuff will have me DNFing. The third thing that really gets me every time, and I always hate it, is like really egregious logical flaws. Like when I get to a part in the book and something just really doesn't make sense and I'm just like, wait a minute here. That just does not compute. Like that feeling will like, I no longer trust an author after that, and I want nothing to do with their work, especially if it's like a thriller or horror where you're supposed to try and like use logical clues to kind of deduce like what's going on or who did it. So like a perfect example of a scenario of this that I've encountered is like a plot line where a character is following some footprints in the snow, but it's specifically mentioned that these footprints were made hours ago, and it's also specifically mentioned that it has been really snowing in those hours between. So as somebody who comes from a very snowy climate that would be used to seeing a foot of snow in an hour or so, those footprints are gonna be gone. Like there's no footprints to follow. So just things like that don't make logical sense, that are like very egregious logical flaws for me, will have me no longer interested. The fourth thing that will have me wanting to put down a book pretty quickly is not enough plot, or not getting the plot that was promised in the synopsis that I was intrigued about. So if we're more focused on things other than the plot and we're going nowhere and we've had no progression for quite a while, I just lose interest. Like I can enjoy a good character, but all of my favorite characters are the ones that are reacting to something happening. So if nothing's happening, then they're not reacting to anything interesting, and therefore I'm bored. Or there are also cases where I read the synopsis of something and think, oh, great, that's going to be perfect. I'm so fascinated by this. And then I get into it, and maybe that synopsis is like, I don't know, the first 20% of the book. And then we're shifted into something completely different that I do not care about. No, I'm over it. Now, this doesn't always backfire. Like, sometimes I can really enjoy what is introduced or what ends up happening. But there are definitely instances where I'm like, this is not what this was marketed as. This was not what I was promised. This is not what I want, and I'm over it. The next thing the authors sometimes do that will really frustrate me, but that don't necessarily maybe make me DNF a book itself, but will maybe have me DNFing the series moving forward, is when they gloss over a moment that I thought we were building up to. Like, we had all this information and mentions of something that was going to happen, and we were anticipating seeing how that moment went. And then we get to the part that moment happens and we get very minimal information on it, or very like minimal explanation on things. That just has me frustrated. Like, at that point, you've just teased something that I was fascinated by, and now I am so let down and feel like I've had no payoff to the buildup that you were trying to incorporate. That will have me really frustrated and just, no, I'm over it. The next thing that I've figured out that really frustrates me is when we have a plot solution or a plot point that just feels like it comes out of thin air and conveniently resolves something. And this kind of plays into the same sort of sensation of something was built up. So we have this problem that we are experiencing, we're built up, I as the reader am probably trying to theorize, oh, how are we going to solve this? Or how are we going to like figure this out? And then something comes out of nowhere and just fixes it. Like, no. I don't have the payoff that I wanted. I now don't trust the author to let me have my own theories and guesses at things, because they're just going to throw something in willy-nilly that's going to resolve it. Like, at that point, a lot of the joy of the reading experience for me has just been removed from the book. So yeah, that'll do it for me. Now, I don't mind as much if something kind of comes out of nowhere, but then it's like quickly explained afterwards, and the explanation of how that happened is satisfying. The cases that more frustrate me are more when it's like out of nowhere and it's never addressed again. Like, it's just one and done. That was the fix, you know, stuff like that. Like, no. I also don't necessarily mind as much when it's a book in a series and that kind of thing is like the ending of the book, and I know that there's a reasonable promise that we'll get some explanation in the beginning of the next book. It's more a case of like, if that kind of thing happens multiple times in a book, or if I start the sequel and we are like not addressing the elephant in the room at all, we've moved on, we don't care, like, that will irk me and just have me having no desire to continue. Another thing that really irks me at times is just really unnatural, clunky dialogue. And I've really only encountered this in like one book that vividly stands out to me, and that was Mexican Gothic. And I can't even remember specifically like quotes from that book that just had me feeling that way, but I just remember feeling like the dialogue in that was just completely terrible. I don't know specifically what it was about the dialogue in that one, like I said, but I just remember it feeling like it wasn't natural and it felt clunky and it just didn't work for me. But the real clincher with Mexican Gothic for me was my next reason I will DNF a book, and that is when I get a reveal that I hate. Like, when I get a reveal and I'm just like, really? Like, really? No. That'll have me DNFing. Like, at that point, I no longer trust an author to give me an interesting payoff for what I'm reading, and I lose interest. And then there are two more reasons, and they're sort of tied together, but I've made them separate points because they can kind of feel a little different. The first one is when something happening, especially in horror, is just really intangible, or it feels like you're in a fever dream. Like, when you can't pin down what's happening, and when you can't pin down what a character is experiencing, even if you don't know what's happening, when something is just really wishy-washy and you have no clue, you can't even follow anymore, like, that will have me less interested in a book. I think because I don't necessarily experience a book visually, one of the main draws to how I do experience a book is how tense it is. How pulse pounding is it? How invested in the story am I? And when I don't even know or understand or grasp a piece of the story in order to have that tension or investment, that's a problem for me. And I think not only does this kind of thing kind of play into the lack of tension for me, it's also the character reactions, because one of the biggest, most important things about a character for me is how they're experiencing something or how they're reacting to something. And if they can't even tell me what they're reacting to, how am I supposed to appreciate the reaction that they're having? You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, it plays into that a little bit as well. But then the other sort of point that kind of ties into this a little bit is when a book really doesn't give you context for anything, you're thrown in the deep end, you spend forever trying to figure out what the heck is even happening. It may not be fever dreamy, but you don't understand like the full scope of something or the full picture of something. And that for me can get very frustrating too, because I will be so focused on trying to pin down the context and I won't be appreciating like the other aspects of the story as much, because I will be focused on trying to be over here trying to figure out what the heck is happening. Now, this kind of can be like varying degrees for me. There are some stories where you are given like some context, but not all of it, and then you slowly kind of unpack more and more and more, and those can be really fun for me. It's more the scenario of like when you have no context and you don't find things out until like the end of the book. That's when I'm just like, no. And then there's kind of one more element or aspect that will maybe have me putting down a book, but that doesn't necessarily mean I'm not interested in it anymore. It's more of like a not for now situation. And that is if I just find myself like not really in the mood or the headspace for something. So this doesn't tend to happen to me very often. But there are cases where I pick something up and then I realize, oh, this format isn't really working for me. So I may wait until I have like a different format to try. Or there are cases like with my favorite book this year so far, Malice. The first time I picked this up, I only had the audiobook, and there is a lot of information given to the reader in the beginning, and it was just too much to try and follow that quickly because I needed to be meticulous and take notes in order to have the payoff. And I'm so glad that I got my hands on the physical copies and revisited this later, because man, did I have so much joy in the payoff of having done that. But yeah, so there are cases like this where it's like I need a different format in order to really appreciate this. And then I've also had the opposite where I try to read something with my eyeballs, but I'm not that invested until I get the audio. So something like The Lies of Locke Lamora, like the narrator here, Michael Page, injects so much life and humor and interesting tone into the characters that I wasn't really that invested into the story until I tried the audiobook. So yeah, there are cases like that where I will just need a different format to really inject me into the story for various reasons. But there's also the case of like, I pick up a fantasy and maybe it's more dense or more brain power than I'm willing to commit to at that moment. And so I'll put it down and say, okay, I'll revisit this when I'm more in the mood to like pay very close attention to absolutely every little nitpicky thing. There are some times where I'm just like, okay, I want something that's not very dense or not overly complicated right now. Maybe it's because I'm multitasking, or maybe it's because I'm sleepy, but whatever the case, there are times where I will kind of not for now a book that I end up loving later. But those to me feel very different than DNFs. So I kind of classify them as like soft DNF or like not for nows. But yeah. So hopefully you found something interesting in this discussion today. Let me know down below in the comments, what are some of the reasons that you tend to DNF? Do you have any common threads that make you just like, absolutely, no, this isn't for me, I'm done? And also let me know what your most recent DNF was. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe on your way out if you want to, and have a great day. Bye.